Today we are back in Valletta, and if you haven't realized it yet, even though Malta has such a small capital, there are so many things to see and do. Every time you think you've seen everything, you somehow discover another little corner, another beautiful building, or another piece of history hiding around the next street. But today, we are not going to spend the entire day inside museums and cathedrals. Before heading into Valletta, we decided to start our morning somewhere a little different, at the rocky beach in Sliema. And surprisingly, there were already people swimming. Honestly, I don't know how they did it because even though the weather was beautiful, I definitely didn't have the courage to jump into the water. But I can imagine that swimming in the sea early in the morning, surrounded by Malta's rocky coastline, must be one of the most refreshing ways to start your day. After enjoying the views and taking in the peaceful morning atmosphere, it was finally time to head towards Valletta. It's such a beautiful way to arrive in Valletta because you get to see the city from a completely different perspective. The massive walls, the historic buildings, the harbor, everything looks even more impressive from the water. And this time we had a mission to visit some of the places we hadn't managed to see during our previous days in Valletta. Our first stop was somewhere that quickly became one of my biggest loves in Valletta, the National Library of Malta. Imagine walking into a place surrounded by books and manuscripts that are hundreds of years old. As someone who absolutely loves history, there is something incredibly special about being surrounded by so much knowledge that has survived for centuries. But the National Library of Malta has a fascinating history that goes back centuries. The library officially established in 1776 during the time of the Order of St. John, although its collection began much earlier. Over the years, the Knights gathered an incredible numbers of books, manuscripts, maps, and historical documents. The library became a place where centuries of knowledge were preserved, including works connected to the history of Malta and the Order of St. John. Unfortunately, we couldn't explore the entire library. Part of it is reserved for students and researchers, so it isn't open to regular visitors. But even the section we could visit was absolutely beautiful, and knowing that so much history is kept behind those doors makes you even more curious about what's inside. Since our visit to the National Library was much shorter than we expected, we suddenly had some extra time to fill, so we decided to simply walk around Valletta and enjoy the beautiful streets while making our way to our next stop. Our next stop was St. John Co-Cathedral, and a little tip, if you're planning to visit it, I definitely recommend getting your tickets online beforehand. It's much easier and you can save yourself some time instead of waiting around to buy them there. St. John Co-Cathedral, from the outside, it may look fairly simple compared to what is waiting inside, but once you walk through those doors, completely different story. The cathedral was built between 1572 and 1577, shortly after the Knights of St. John established Valletta. It was designed by the Maltese architect Girolamo Casar, who is also responsible for many of the city's most important buildings. But here's what makes it so fascinating. This wasn't simply built as a church, it was designed to represent the power, wealth, and devotion of the knights. The interior was transformed over the years, especially during the Baroque period, and today it is covered in incredible golden decorations, marble, paintings, sculptures, and elaborate details. And the entire floor is covered with hundreds of colorful marble tombstones, many belonging to important knights. Each one is decorated with symbols, coats of arms, and inscriptions, almost turning the floor itself into a giant historical record. And then there are the chapels. The cathedral has 8 chapels, each representing a different regional division of the Order of St. John. Each chapel was decorated differently, reflecting the wealth and the identity of its particular group. But perhaps the most famous artwork here is hidden in the oratory. The most famous artwork is the beheading of St. John the Baptist. Unfortunately, I couldn't even get close enough to properly admire this incredible masterpiece. There were hundreds of people inside, and the area around the painting was completely packed, so I had to admire Caravaggio's masterpiece from a distance. But even from there, you can understand why it is considered so special. Inside, you can also find Caravaggio's Saint Jerome writing, another incredible masterpiece that adds even more mystery to this place. There are also stories and legends surrounding the cathedral. One of the most fascinating traditions is connected to the knights themselves. Their lives were surrounded by religion, warfare, and strict codes of honor, and many of them believe that being buried inside this sacred place will bring them closer to eternal salvation. One thing that makes Valletta so beautiful is the contrast. The deep blue Mediterranean waters surrounding the city against the warm honey colored limestone buildings. It almost feels like the whole city was designed to glow in the Mediterranean sun. After exploring the grand buildings of Valletta, we decided to look for something a little different, something hidden away from the busy streets. And that's how we discovered Mysterium Fidei inside St. Catherine's Monastery. The monastery dates back to 1575 and it was originally established to care for female orphans. Over the centuries, it became home to cloistered Augustinian nuns who chose a life of prayer, contemplation, and separation from the outside world. And here is where things become really fascinating. Beneath the monastery is an underground complex that was originally a quarry. The same limestone was actually dug out from beneath the site and used to build the monastery above it. For more than 400 years, these spaces were hidden from the public. Today, visitors can finally walk through this forgotten world and discover what life inside the monastery was like. As you walk through the underground rooms, you can see spaces connected with the everyday lives of the nuns, places for work, prayer, cooking, and even burial. But one of my favorite parts was something you wouldn't expect to find underneath a busy city like Valletta. A secret garden. Yeah, you heard me. Hidden between the old monastery walls, this peaceful little space feels completely separated from the city outside, and that contrast is what makes it so special. The complex also contains all valuated rooms, ovens, wells, and other features that give you a glimpse into how the monastery functioned and how the community survived for generations. And perhaps the most fascinating thing is knowing that this isn't simply an abandoned historical site. And perhaps the most fascinating thing is knowing that this isn't simply an abandoned historical site. The monastery still carries a living connection to its religious past, with cloistered nuns continuing the tradition within its walls. To be honest, today we really went on a marathon. We were moving from one place to another, trying to see and experience as much as possible before the evening. And by the end of it, you could definitely feel the tiredness catching up with us. Looking back, I think waking up earlier than usual was actually one of the best decisions we made. It gave us those extra hours in the morning when the streets were quieter and we had more time to explore. Of course, by the afternoon, our feet were begging for a break, but when you're traveling, sometimes you just want to make the most of every single moment. After having a break, we decided also to visit Casa Rocca Piccola, one of Malta's most fascinating hidden gems, a 16th century palace that allows us to step inside the private world of Maltese nobility. Casa Rocca Piccola was built in the late 1500s for Don Pietro La Rocca, a knight and admiral of the Order of Malta during the period when Valletta was becoming one of the most impressive fortified cities in Europe. Unlike many historic palaces that became empty museums, this place is different. This is still the home of the noble De Piero family who have lived here for generations. Walking through these rooms feels like entering someone's personal story rather than just visiting an old building. Every room has something to tell, from elegant furniture and antique decorations to family portraits and objects that reveal how Maltese aristocrats lived throughout the centuries. You can imagine the conversations that happen here, the celebrations that fill these halls, and the generations of families who walk through these same corridors. One of the things that makes Casa Rocca Piccola so special is how it combines luxury with everyday life. The palace contains beautifully decorated rooms, a charming courtyard, and collections that preserve traditions from Malta's past. It is a reminder that history is not only found in huge monuments or ancient ruins. Sometimes history is hidden inside a home. Inside the walls of a single building, we can discover stories about fashion, tradition, social life, and the people who helped shape this island. Casa Rocca Piccola is more than just a beautiful palace. It is a time capsule, a place where every painting, every piece of furniture, and every stone wall carries a memory. In Malta, history is everywhere in the churches, the fortresses, the underground tunnels, and even inside people's homes. And that is what makes exploring this island so special, because sometimes the greatest stories are not found in the biggest landmarks.
Elle a figé. C'est une fausse, elle, non? Non. Non, regarde.
After visiting Casa Rocca Piccola, we continue our walk through the beautiful streets of Valletta, heading towards the famous St. Elmo Fortress. But sometimes the best discoveries are the ones you don't plan. On the way, we came across a very unusual place hidden inside what used to be a cathedral. Today, this historic space has a completely different atmosphere with antique objects, old treasures, and outlet items displayed inside these ancient walls. And then came the part that gave us a little chill, seeing all the statues of the apostle watching over us from above. Standing there surrounded by these ancient figures and the echoes of the past, it was hard not to imagine all the stories that happened inside these walls. Valletta is full of surprises. Sometimes you're not searching for history simply appears in front of you. After exploring the beautiful streets of Valletta, we finally arrive at one of Malta's most iconic landmarks, St. Elmo Fortress. Standing proudly at the very tip of the peninsula, this fortress has watched over the entrance of Valletta for almost 5 centuries. But behind these massive limestone walls are stories of courage, sacrifice, battles, and moments that changed the history of Malta forever. Before Valletta even existed, this area was already considered extremely important because of its strategic position. From here, the Knights of St. John could control the entrance of the Grand Harbor and protect the island from possible attacks. The first fortification on this side was built in 1552 by the Knights of St. John. After fears of an Ottoman invasion grew stronger, it was named after St. Elmo, the patron saint of sailors, because of its connection with the sea. But the fortress would soon face its greatest challenge. In 1565, Malta became the stage of one of the most famous battles in the Mediterranean history, the Great Siege of Malta. The Ottoman Empire arrived with a huge army and a powerful fleet, hoping to capture Malta and remove the Knights of St. John from the island. The first target was St. Elmo Fortress. For around 1 month, a small group of knights and Maltese soldiers defended this fortress against a much larger Ottoman force. The fighting was brutal. Day and night, the defenders resisted constant attacks, knowing that their chances of survival were becoming smaller. The fortress was eventually captured and almost all of its defenders lost their lives, but their sacrifice was not forgotten. The resistance at St. Elmo delayed the Ottoman army long enough for the rest of Malta's defenses to prepare. This delay played a crucial role in the final victory of the Knights of St. John and the Maltese people. After the Great Siege, St. Elmo was rebuilt and transformed into an even stronger fortress, becoming an important part of Valletta's defenses. Walking through St. Elmo today, it is difficult not to imagine the soldiers who once stood on these walls, looking out towards the sea, waiting for an enemy fleet to appear on the horizon. The thick limestone walls, narrow passages, and defensive positions remind us that it was not built to be beautiful, it was built to survive. But the fortress also has another chapter in its history. During World War II, Malta once again became a target because of its strategic location in the Mediterranean. St. Elmo Fortress played an important military role and the area around it suffered heavy bombing during the conflict. It is incredible to think that the same walls that witnessed the battles between the Knights and the Ottoman Empire centuries earlier also experienced the destruction and fear of modern warfare. Today, St. Elmo Fortress is home to the National War Museum, where visitors can discover Malta's military history from ancient times to the Second World War. Inside, you can find weapons, uniforms, documents, and objects connected to the people who defended this island throughout history. One of the most interesting things about Malta is how many layers of history exist in the same place. A single stone can tell a story from the time of the Knights, the era of the British Empire, the struggles of World War II, and the Malta we know today.
The first merchant ship is hit. Another carrier put out of action. The narrow channel between Africa and Sicily wreak havoc.
There were three terrific explosions. The first HMS.
It is impossible not to talk about another important chapter in Malta's history, the arrival of the French. In 1798, Napoleon Bonaparte arrived in Malta on his way to Egypt and quickly took control of the island from the Knights of St. John, who had ruled Malta for more than 250 years. At first, many Maltese people hoped for change, but the French introduced strict reforms, including taking treasures from the church and changing traditional privileges. These actions created anger among the population, leading to a rebellion against French rule. The French occupation lasted only around 2 years, from 1798 to 1800s, before the Maltese, with the help of the British, forced them to surrender. Even today, you can still find traces of this short but dramatic period in Malta's streets, architecture, and history. After exploring the fortress, we found a small and charming coffee shop just outside the walls. Here, you can relax with a coffee, browse through interesting books, and discover unique souvenirs to remember your visit to Malta, a perfect little stop after walking through centuries of history. After visiting Fortress St. Elmo, we visit Palazzo della Salle, located near the heart of the city. This impressive palace is one of Valletta's historic landmarks, built during the time of the Order of St. John. Its elegant architecture reflects the wealth, power, and artistic influence that shaped Malta during this period. Today, Palazzo della Salle is known as the home of the Società Filarmonica Nazionale La Valletta, one of Malta's oldest cultural organizations founded in the 19th century. Inside these walls, music, art, and history come together. The palace hosts exhibitions and cultural events, keeping the connections between Malta's past and present alive. What makes Valletta so special is that you don't need to enter a museum to find history. Sometimes it is right in front of you. And this was our day exploring the beautiful city of Valletta. We started discovering some of the hidden treasures of this incredible city, including the beautiful library near St. John Co-Cathedral. Centuries of knowledge preserved inside its walls. We continue our journey to St. John Co-Cathedral, one of the most impressive places we visited in Malta. Behind its simple exterior, we discover a breathtaking interior filled with golden details, beautiful artwork, and incredible history. The peaceful monastery, where we experienced a completely different atmosphere, and probably the funniest surprise of the day was seeing cats literally sleeping in a bucket. Sometimes the smallest moments, the ones you remember the most. We also had the chance to visit Casa Rocca Piccola, a beautiful personal home that opened its doors to show us how Maltese nobility lived centuries ago. Every room had its own story. But beyond all the amazing places we visited today, what truly made Valletta special was simply walking through its streets. The golden limestone buildings, the beautiful balconies, and the views of the sea appearing from almost every corner made every step feel magical. And finally, we ended our adventure at the historic St. Elmo Fortress, a place that witnessed some of Malta's most important moments. Standing there, surrounded by the sea and centuries of history, was the perfect ending to an incredible day. Valletta is definitely one of these capitals that deserves to be visited and admired. With its golden limestone streets, incredible architecture, breathtaking sea views, and centuries of history around every corner, this city feels like a living museum. A place where every step reveals another beautiful story waiting to be discovered. As the evening was setting, we were welcomed by one of the city's most iconic views. This impressive getaway is a perfect introduction to a capital built by the Knights of St. John, where history surrounds you from the very first step. And if you visit Valletta at noon, don't miss the traditional cannon salute from the saluting battery every day at 12 p.m. The cannon is fired as a tradition that has continued for centuries. One thing that truly surprised me about Malta was the beauty of its sea. Everywhere you look, you can find crystal clear blue water, hidden coves, and incredible bays that look like they came straight out of a postcard. But honestly, one of my biggest regrets during this trip was that I couldn't enter the water. Standing there watching the waves and seeing that beautiful Mediterranean sea so close but not being able to swim was a little heartbreaking. Malta is definitely a place where you should take time to explore its coastline, from the relaxing waters of St. Peter Bay to the golden sands of Golden Bay. Every beach and bay has its own unique charm. You should also discover places like Melilla Bay, Blue Grotto, Nejna Bay, and the famous Blue Lagoon in Comino, where the turquoise water is simply breathtaking. Even if you don't swim in them, these places are worth visiting just for the views, the peaceful atmosphere, and the unforgettable colors of the Mediterranean. So, if you come to Malta, don't only explore the cities and history, make sure to leave time for the sea, because the coastline is one of the island's greatest treasures. Standing here and looking at this incredible blue sea, I couldn't stop thinking about the people who live in Malta and have this beauty as part of their everyday life. For us, visitors, seeing this crystal clear water, the hidden bays, and the amazing Mediterranean views feels like a special moment that we'll remember forever. But for the Maltese people, this is their home, a place they wake up to every day. Imagine having the possibility to finish your day by walking along the coast, watching the sunset over the sea, or just taking a quick swim in these beautiful waters whenever you want. It must be such a unique feeling to have this paradise around you all the time. From the turquoise waters of the Blue Lagoon to the peaceful bays like Melilla Bay, St. Peter's Bay, Golden Bay, and so many other hidden corners around the island, Malta truly feels blessed by nature. Even though I couldn't enter the sea during this trip, just standing next to it and seeing its beauty was already an unforgettable experience. Sometimes we don't realize how lucky people are to live in places that others travel thousands of kilometers to discover, and Malta's sea is definitely one of those treasures that should never be taken for granted.